What's up guys, Phoenix here, and this video is going to be something I haven't really done before. In fact, I have never done it before. This is going to be my top 10 decks for the August 29th, 2016 format leading up to the release of the ABC Structure deck. That means I will not be including the ABC deck or anything from Invasion Vengeance, as things can change in the months leading up to those releases, and trying to place them in here just isn't really justifiable. Now keep in mind these are solely my opinions based on the information we currently have, and my own knowledge and instincts about the status of the current metagame, and your own opinions may vary from my own. But with that said, let's not waste any more time and just jump into what I believe are the top 10 decks of the August 2016 format. Starting us out at number 10, I have Metalfoes Yang Zing. The release of the Metalfoes has definitely given the Yang Zing archetype the huge boost it needed to start filling out some of its hidden potential. I've always found it hard to believe that the only dedicated synchro archetype to be released in the game since 2012 was going to be destined to live a life of mediocrity with a game plan of just only walling behind subpar floaters. The Metalfoes truly make this deck shine as they destroy your Yang Zings for profit, and thus accelerate the deck's engine to new heights, allowing you some insane interactions and plays. Boxia also doubling as both this deck's best combo piece while also being a form of non-destructive removal is an incredibly huge deal, as spinning threats to the deck is one of the most permanent ways of not having to deal with them again, and you're not really deviating at all from your combo strings into dedicated removal cards. Boxia truly just handles it all for you. I couldn't justify placing this higher on the list due to the lack of new support cards and overall suboptimal playability resulting from that fact. The deck currently has many ways to open decently, and when it does, the deck is amazing. But without Dinglong or 9 branches, the deck generates quite a few too many mismatched hands that you are going to feel pretty bad staring down over the course of a tournament. Although it is one of my favorite decks personally, and I hope to see a lot more from it in the future. Moving on to number 9, I have Masked Heroes. Darklaw has and will always be a huge threat, especially when backed up via traps, and considering the 2 decks expected to do the best straight out of this ban list are Blue Eyes and Burning Abyss. These are 2 decks that either require the graveyard and or search/draw power to get moving, and it would seem that Darklaw.deck would be a very solid pick as a rogue option moving into this first part of the format, given those factors. Adding to that, the deck now has access to one of the best extra deck cards in the game currently, Ultimaya Zulkin. With the release of Coral Dragon as a generic level 6 synchro tuner, the hero deck has gained a good bit of new flexibility. Coral Dragon plus Malicious can easily make Zulkin for very much free, as Malicious can retrieve another copy from deck, and Coral Dragon nets you a draw, without even factoring that you could have destroyed something with it. This isn't even factoring in cards like Destiny Draw, or that Zulkin also pluses you with its own effect regardless of how efficiently you summoned him. With a deck that can easily have access to both Darklaw and cards like Crystal Wing, it's probably something that shouldn't be allowed, and it's definitely something that could not be included on this list. The only thing keeping it this low on the list are some minor consistency issues, and that the deck loses a lot of what makes it really good when it's made to go second outside of drawing its blowout cards like Raigeki and Dark Hole. Probably more so than any other deck in the format, this deck just gets significantly worse when made to go second. But it is still a very solid option as a rogue option for you to pick because Darklaw is still quite an amazing floodgate monster. Number 8, Shaddoll Trains. This is a deck I personally really enjoy conceptually. Big beaters that are easily accessible, Shaddoll Fusion, and an absolutely broken field spell should all equal an amazing deck, right? Unfortunately, the problem lies with how long we had to wait for the train cards to be imported. Ideally, we would have had these cards almost 2 years ago when Secrets of Eternity was released in January 2015. But with only a recent release to the TCG, the game may have evolved way past this deck's prime. But that isn't actually all bad. Due to the irrelevance of Shaddolls being in the format since November 2015's Construct banning, there's almost no player in this game who actively chooses to play around Shaddoll Fusion anymore. The card has long since been forgotten from people's memory of the old nightmare scenario of letting your opponent fuse from their deck for free. Now granted, while Construct is banned, there normally wouldn't be any issue with just not playing around Shaddoll Fusion, as all the other fusions are fairly subpar by today's standards and don't really answer boards or threats. But when you combine a free Shekinaga with Revolving Switchyard or Daracrane, things can easily start getting out of hand, especially with the free Shaddoll effect and Railcar Search in the end phase that you've just gained while summoning your beatsticks. Number 81 Super Dreadnought Railcannon Super Dora has a huge body both ways, as well as offers protection from all effects onto any monster for a turn, including itself. This boss monster is absolutely amazing and can be very difficult to answer, but it isn't really in the unfair category because it is only protecting itself for a turn, and it is not a permanent protection effect like Ultimate Falcon or Apocalypse Towers. But, like I said, this deck has probably become an option for us a little bit too late to really be anything more than just one of the more solid rogue options, but it is most definitely a very fun deck to play in that. The number 7 slot is kind of a blanket slot that I'm dedicated entirely to Demise decks. Specifically, Cliffort Demise and Magispector Demise are what I'm really focusing on here, but Satellar Demise and Yosenju Demise can also find a place here as they are also fairly valid Demise decks that have seen degrees of success and have decent playability / mechanics to use. Card of Demise is an absolutely ridiculous card, and I don't think it should be allowed in the game. While the argument of it assisting rogue decks is a very valid statement, ultimately the only real competitive application for this card has been to fuel degenerate decks that try to establish a play string of set 5 traps each turn while riding a very simple monster interaction as its offensive force, while your opponent struggles to even make a single play through the sheer volume of traps or any possible floodgates that are present. These decks are decently functional, but ultimately are being driven further and further out of the format as their ceilings are incredibly low in games where Demise is not seen or drawn. However, they are very much a valid option for tournament play, and you can see a good bit of success with them. Just don't be too upset when or if your glass cannon fails to fire. Number 6, Mermail Atlanteans. The water deck is always going to have a place biting at the ankles of the best deck in a format until major changes take place to its card pool. The deck is unique in that it is an engine that is very effective at establishing boards and or OTKing with extremely low amounts of cards. Resources are used very efficiently, and obviously the more you have, the more you can do. Even the deck building stage of this deck is fairly unique, as it's one of the only decks you can either build specifically to go first with or to go second with. You can even choose the conversion side between those options if you see fit. Whether it's building to go first and hand looping your opponent and setting up a board, or building to go second and trying to go with an all-out OTK strategy, there are always options open for you. Playing brick-like cards in this deck has arguably less potential impact on your starting hands than it would in other decks, due to the aforementioned ability to play with very low amounts of combo pieces. Neptibus plus any water monster in your hand is a literal 2-card OTK. Because of this, as long as the rest of your hand allows you to play the game, you can easily blow games right open into your favor. Instant Fusion also has a huge amount of value in this deck over others, as it can give you free extra Dragoon searches, and an easy 1-card Dweller that can boost your entire board in the process. That 500 attack stacks up on all of your water monsters and becomes very relevant over the course of your turn, game plan, and OTK potential. It becomes incredibly relevant, and I feel like people throw this deck to the wayside a little bit too readily, even though it is still very much a very, very valid option going forward, especially with the new cards we get like Tree Toad in Invasion Vengeance. The number 5 slot goes to Kozmo variants, both Demise Kozmo and Fire King Kozmo. The hits to Emergency Teleport and Dart Destroyer definitely hurt this deck a fair bit on paper, but ultimately at the end of the day, Kozmo Town can still recycle the Dart Destroyer, Tin Can and Farm Curl can still search the Dart Destroyer, Call of the Haunted and Oasis of Dragon Souls still both exist in multiples. While dealing with boards and hands of multiple Dart Destroyers will be a thing of the past, this card at 1 will still be an issue for most decks and strategies simply by it existing. With cards like Allure of Darkness and Gold Sarcophagus being unlimited as well, the Kozmo deck can fairly easily power into more cards than ever, as Kozmo Town turns Allure of Darkness into Pot of Greed, and Gold Sarc turns into Rhoda for any Kozmo monster. While currently I'm unsure which build will be the best going forward, I want to put my money preemptively on Fire King Kozmo. It plays a larger quantity of ways to kickstart plays with the loss of the 1 E-Tele, and while opening with Dart Destroyer was great for combo potential, there are still many other Kozmo ships you can pop with Island to yield you a similar resulting play string. Overall, it also contains a higher concentration of darks, allowing it to have better access to Allure as draw power, in a similar capacity as the Demise build does in terms of its draw power with Card of Demise. As well as Kozmo Town is much more readily accessible, since that version does support playing Terraforming. Although both Kozmo variants are not without their flaws, I can easily see them carrying on as at least a top 5 contender. Just above Kozmo in the number 4 slot, I put Herald of Perfection variants. Now, I may be a bit personally biased towards this deck, but that doesn't change the fact that it's already seeing some minor success on the YCS level and is arguably one of the most consistent decks that we have access to this format. The deck runs such a huge number of draw and search cards that it can't be ignored at this point. It's a fact. There's tons of these cards in the deck. Its search power is actually very reminiscent of Necro's decks of early 2015, when that deck still had 3 Prep and 3 Brionac. But having access to the newly printed pre-preparation of rights, Cyber Angel Benton, and Ritual Sanctuary have all given this deck a huge boost of consistency and potency. You're able to search Star Seraph Scepter and Sovereignty very easily, making it incredibly easy to power into more cards and take them away from your opponents in the process. Herald of Perfection is literally Infernity Barrier, multiple times per turn, which is vastly supported by this deck's newfound potential. It is not uncommon for you to end your turn with a Herald of Perfection and Saphira Queen of Dragons on your board, with 4 to 5 fairies in your hand, all to be used as negations for all of your opponent's cards. If you happen to resolve Scepter Sovereignty during your first turn also, you usually and likely made Evil Swarm Ouroboros to take a card from your opponent's hand, leaving them to lose their extra card that they get for going second, making it even harder for them to out-Herald with their new hand of 5 cards. This deck is also not without its flaws though. Kaijus are Herald's worst nightmare, and if the deck catches on, playing around Kaijus will become a necessity, which can be problematic, although not impossible. But the biggest issue with this deck is likely going second, and that is because going second you rely pretty heavily on Scepter Sovereignty plays or Instant Fusion plays to break boards and then establish your own. But this deck just handily reinforces how absolutely broken going first is in this game. If you go first with this deck and establish any regular field, basically, you've likely won. Spot number 3 goes to Pendulum variants, specifically Magician, Odd Eyes, and Dracopal decks. I don't really see Metalfoes as being all the way there yet, enough to consistently do well before Invasion Vengeance gives them another, boost to their card pool, and as such are not being included in this slot. I would love to be proven wrong, however. I would love to see that deck actually perform well coming into this format. But, for now, the other Pendulum decks we have access to are all still, however, very much forces to be reckoned with. The Pendulum mechanic is absolutely broken, and it's absurd to even think that it exists. With the loss of 2 Kirans, 2 Pendulum Calls, and all of our monkey boards, people are very quick to celebrate. Hip hip hooray, the deck is dead! Unfortunately, they would be wrong. See, the Pendulum cards are all still incredibly good and still have the same problem on the game that they have always had. They still have consistency cards and cards that are already powerful in their own right, but when you factor in that they just do not permanently die, all of a sudden things start getting incredibly crazy. I see the Magician deck doing best straight out of the gate simply because losing 2 Pendulum Call and Monkey Board were definitely effective hits, but not nearly enough to keep the deck from doing what it does best. The loss of 2 Karens is fine because Bunbuku searches it, and then other cards search Bunbuku. All in all, the Pendulum deck is still very well positioned to contend as a top 3 deck in the current format, and it's arguably one of the better decks at going second, specifically with the Magician build. And if that becomes a factor of your deck being able to have to go first and second reliably, then this is definitely one of those top picks for you. Sliding in at number 2 is Burning Abyss and their Pure or Phantom Knight variants. Why this deck still exists after literally 2 years is baffling to me. Konami really just doesn't seem to understand what the problem cards are in this situation. For the record, those are Dante and Seer. One of these cards should have been banned by this point, but instead Beatrice is who gets the shaft this time around, I guess, which honestly probably wasn't necessary at all. But regardless, this deck is still every bit of what it was in previous years and formats, with access to amazing cards like Firelake and Traveler, Beatrice, and all of the rank 3s that it runs, Utopic Future, all that nonsense. The deck now has triple Allure to abuse, so hey, I guess that sounds fun. These cards will always remain some of the best cards Konami has ever printed because of their consistency and versatility. The deck has an amazing floater engine, and while rank 3s aren't typically the greatest, they are currently the best they have ever been with cards like Grand Pulse and Breaksword in circulation. I always remember joking in 2013 after Diamond Dire was released, so how long until we get our rank 3 Scrap Dragon? And now here it actually is. Expect this deck to keep doing what it has always been doing, and to survive at least this part of the format to give the number 1 spot a run for its money. Honorable mentions go out to DDD for also being late as hell to the party, Fluffles, and Dragoonities because I'm a fucking weeaboo. Smiley face. My number 1 pick should honestly be incredibly predictable, as the only other deck that was literally untouched on this ban list besides Water was Blue Eyes. And with good reason. It's too new to hit. Konami wants that dinero. But in all seriousness, the only things keeping this deck from doing well was Monarchs existing in the format, as it was the deck's hardest matchup. Stormforth was a hell of a card. Now, with Monarchs taking the most severe hits on the ban list and essentially being completely knocked out of the Dangerous Factors range, notice they are nowhere on this top 10 list, Blue Eyes has its time to shine. This deck has an incredible amount of draw and search power, as well as amazing revival cards like Return of the Dragon Lords, all under one set of sleeves. This deck can power through boards and back row, lock out grave effects and pendulum summoning with Blue Eye Spirit Dragon, and overall has a large amount of tech choices at people's disposal to try and gain the edge competitively. While this deck may be back and forth with Burning Abyss for best deck status, I definitely expect it to be the most represented deck of the upcoming format until our next releases. And with a deck like this, there is most definitely power in numbers. But anywho, that has been my picks for the top 10 decks of the August 2016 format. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my choices in the comments down below, as I'm definitely curious to hear your opinions. But other than that, let me know if you guys like this style of video coming from me, if you enjoyed the analysis of each pick and all that whatnot. As usual, comment, rate, subscribe. Links are in the description to my Facebook pages, background music playlists, and Twitch links. Use any of them to your liking. Give us a hashtag top 10 in the comments if you liked this video and made it all the way to the end. And, well, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching as usual, and as always guys, take care.